Hello, welcome back to my channel. I've got another story for you, and this one is based on random words, so we're back to the original brief for this channel. But first of all, I just want to remind you that my book Elena in Exile is currently available on Amazon, or you can actually get it through Barnes & Noble, possibly other booksellers. You may have to request it if you go to your local bookshop and ask them to get a copy in, or via the usual online sources. And if you want to read this for free and review it, that is, absolutely nothing. Join up booksprout.com, and there you will be able to download a copy in exchange for a review. You will have to provide the review on Amazon. That's part of the deal with Booksprout, quite hard to say. But you can read Elena in Exile for nothing. Or, if you want to be ultra kind and a little bit quicker, you can just go on Amazon and read the first 50, 60 pages and drop a review of them if you want. Everything helps. The book just needs to get out into the world. It's a massive struggle to get past the gatekeepers that are the algorithms, effectively. Because if this book doesn't get in front of people's eyes, they'll never know it exists, and therefore they can't like or dislike it. So there you go. Elena in Exile. Available now. All right, enough sales pitch. So this is story number 161. And these are the 5 words that it's based upon. And it's called The Mermaid and the Whale. There's not a lot of money in running an antiques business in an English seaside town. People don't come down from London because they have a wealth of disposable income. They usually relocate for a change of scenery and to avoid the constant reminders of conspicuous wealth that living in the capital provides. There are enough retirees and antiquity-loving hipsters in Margate to keep my shop ticking over, but I'll never be rich. I've made my peace with that, and I'm working on making peace with my regrets too. I have a young apprentice, Clark, a mixed race and slightly effeminate youth, who's probably around 25. I've never asked. He doesn't say much, and occasionally I'll spot bruises on his arms he tries hard to conceal. But he's keen to learn the business. I show my support by paying him a decent wage, a good commission on items over £50, and by teaching him the little I know about the trade. I only need Clark at the weekend, really. There are a cluster of antique and vintage shops on the North Down Road, and I'm probably one of the least knowledgeable and most atypical proprietors. The tattoos stand out, apparently, as does the eye patch. That said, I do have a cordial relationship with Giles and Tim, who run North Down Antiques. They got here first, and Mel Trelawney, who owns Bric-a-Brac Attack by the yoga studio. Mel's an occasional squeeze. We're both single, me by choice and Mel due to the inexplicable suicide of her husband Adam, and yet we both prefer the casual arrangement we have to anything more formal. There's a lot of that in this town. Lives are tenuous, provisional here. There are a lot of escapees from the past. I'm one of them. What can I say? Mum died in childbirth, Dad from a heart attack when I was 11. There followed the usual, almost cliched array of dysfunctional children's homes and inadequate foster care before my stepmom, Louise, arrived to shepherd me to a troubled young adulthood. I joined the Marines at 19, lasted until I was 25, including a brief posting to Afghanistan. That messed me up for any occupation other than nightclub bouncer work, which proved even more chaotic and violent than my active service. I threw a couple of fellow squaddies out of a Kensington club for pawing the waitresses, and they returned with 2 of their mates and jumped me on the way home. I lost an eye, but managed to cripple one of my attackers by throwing him in front of a passing taxi. The wet crunch of his spine on the Toyota's bonnet gave me a moment of satisfaction, followed by pervasive feelings of guilt and shame. I avoided prison, but took the advice of my solicitor and sought new employment, working security for a company specialising in hiring antiques for film shoots. That introduced me to both the Kent coast on a Regency set potboiler and to the wonderful world of antiques. I've always loved the Antiques Roadshow, and now that odd proclivity seemed to make sense. I parlayed my experience into a shop assistant position, then took over the place when my employer, Kenneth, passed away. I was sceptical, but his widow insisted. I just turned 30, and again a sympathetic woman provided a lifeline. So that's the potted history, and the 15 years since that day have been largely uneventful, unless you call selling a 17th century ottoman to Ralph Fiennes an event. Now let me tell you how my new life almost unravelled yesterday. It all started with a porcelain whale. I don't specialise. I'll sell anything and everything I find interesting and think others will enjoy too. I have accordions, a dentist's chair, ancient niblicks, old gramophones, Portmeirion dinner sets, a Mickey Mouse alarm clock, and a jovial blue whale piggy bank. The latter sits behind my desk on a low shelf and is not for sale. I drop the occasional pound coin into the slit where its blowhole should be. When it's full, I take it to the bank and use whatever notes I get for a treat. The last treat was a ticket to see the Waterboys play at Dreamland. There was a full pink moon that evening in a crystal clear sky. It was magical. We saw the whole of the moon, plus Venus in the ascendant. Anyhow, yesterday a slim, artistic-looking woman in her early 50s wanted to buy my whale. She had a sort of exquisite gauntness I found weirdly alluring, and her colourful beads jingled like the bell by my front door. "Oh, that's rather fun," she exclaimed, spotting Moby. I know, obvious. Not for sale, I'm afraid," I said, perhaps a little preemptively. That's a shame. Piggy bank?" I nodded, embarrassed by my earlier curtness. I'm a bit sentimental about him. Never seen another like it. She smiled and continued to walk around the shop, passing a long-fingered hand over things, as if appraising them by touch. She lingered by a mid-century sideboard, one of the largest items in the front room. Very fashionable these days, and priced at £550. I smelled a potential sale, and decided I'd take £450 at a push. "I'll tell you what," I said, stepping up from behind the desk and rolling up my sleeves. "If you take the sideboard, I'll throw in Moby for free." She laughed at my impudence, her eyes flicking down to the tattoos. I had a brief erotic flash of imagination involving me, the elegant artist, and the sideboard, but shook it aside. Business trumps lust these days, every time. "Not at this price," she countered. "Do you deliver?" "Can do. If you're in tomorrow around 6 p.m, I said nonchalantly as possible. That sideboard would cover half my rent this month. Clark would help me load it into the van and deliver it after we shut. I'd have to slip him 20 quid and drop him off at home. 400, she said, making penetrating eye contact. "I live in Canterbury. Is that okay?" I delivered a theatrical indrawing of breath. "I don't usually go that far." Why was everything sounding like an innuendo? 450 covers my petrol. My artist let out an equally false sigh. "I can stretch to 420, but that's really all I've got." I ran the numbers. Still worth it. I stuck out my hand for a shake. "You're on. 420 it is." "Plus the whale and delivery tomorrow?" I'll admit I was enjoying her ability to negotiate. She'd make a great business partner, I thought, shaking her surprisingly dry and abrasive hand. Perhaps not a painter then. A sculptor? Moments later I was emptying my piggy bank into a Tupperware box. My customer then surprised me by reaching into a beaded purse and pulling out a stack of £50 notes. I couldn't help but notice there were at least 4 more left over after she handed me 9 and waited for her change. I could have pushed her higher. I wrote her out a receipt and she filled in her address on my delivery form, and that sealed the deal. It also meant I'd have to head to the bank's night safe on the way home. There had been a spate of break-ins recently and I didn't want to risk leaving the cash in the shop overnight. Cash payments are so rare nowadays that I got rid of the old safe. At 6 p.m, after locking up, I left the shop with a fat bankroll of notes pushed deep into my inside pocket. The wind had picked up, but it was still a brightly sunny summer's evening, so I decided to take the coastal road down past the police station before turning back in for Cecil Square. It was more scenic. The downside of this route is that it includes my favourite view, where you round the summit of Fort Hill and there's the Turner Gallery and harbour to your right, the curved gable of the Georgian terraces to your left, and the beach straight ahead. As I reached the top of the hill, evening sunlight glinted off the water and the sand was a shimmering golden crescent. A pint in the harbour bar beckoned. Of course I should deposit the cash first, but then the pub, basically a small shed on the harbour wall near the lighthouse, occasionally had trouble with their card machine. Cash would be easier. Thirst triumphed over common sense, so I diverted right instead of turning left down the hill into the old town. As was my habit, I requested a plastic glass and took my pint of Canterbury Pale out onto the harbour wall. The tide was mostly out, and a selection of small pleasure boats were decorously distributed across the weed-green sand between beach and wall. No flashy yachts or fishing boats here, just small skiffs I'd never seen a single soul launch. I walked past the hipster taco place and the other mysterious bar I'd for some reason always avoided, and headed for the hidden bench by the bronze mermaid sculpture. I suppose she's not really a mermaid, since she doesn't have a fishy tail, just a wide skirt of scallop shells, but that's what I've always called her. Maybe my artist made her, or perhaps she'd know the sculptor. The thriving local art scene was a close-knit community. With a pang of disappointment, I saw that my bench was occupied by a group of young men with hoodies and close-cropped hair, playing one another clips on their phones and passing a joint. I gave them a curt nod of acknowledgement. 2 were white, 1 Asian and 1 black. At least they're not racist, I mused, then felt bad for having that thought. The men were probably around the same age as Clark and didn't need my prejudices adding to the societal rejection they probably already felt. I decided to lean on the low, weather-worn railing and look down at the waves and across at the bay. This meant turning my back on the youngsters. I heard a muttering about an old boy and some laughter, but concentrated on scanning the figures on the beach steps. I wondered if I might recognize anyone among the tourists. Midway through my perusal, I felt a tap on the shoulder. I turned, and a warm cloud of marijuana smoke enveloped me. I coughed, and there was more laughter. "Whoa, a bit early for the ganja for me, lads," I said, trying to keep things light. The scrawniest of the youths, a white kid, stubbed out the remains of the blunt. "Got a light?" he said, his plainly degenerate face well within my personal space, which, to be fair, is a bit more extensive than most folks. Once a loner, always a loner. The fact that the kids clearly had a way to light their smokes was provocatively obvious. Fortunately, it was also moot. I have no use for lighters. "No, I don't smoke, sadly," I replied. Why sadly? "No," Scrawny said, clearly looking to start something. "What's with the pirate look?" His friends fell about as if this was a peerless bon mot. "The eye patch," I replied coolly, trying to conceal the adrenaline already rising inside, the old fight or flight response. "Got it defending folks like you in Hellmand." Not entirely true, of course, but a little restructuring of the bio might come in handy here. "Hell where?" one of the others muttered, looking up. I realised with the start that this one was probably a girl. "Afghanistan," I replied, consciously turning my back on them. Maybe they'd respect my history, maybe they'd just get bored. Evidently not, for there came another tap. I turned more slowly this time. "And what you got in your pocket?" He spotted the bulge. Cleverer than I'd thought. "Nothing that's any of your business," I said, upping the aggression ante. "Oh yeah? Want to see what's in my pocket?" Of course his question was rhetorical. Unfortunately, the 8-inch serrated blade he withdrew from his side pocket was not. I couldn't let it happen. Instinct and a volcanic shot of adrenaline took over. I stepped to one side, twisting Scrawny's arm behind his back. He dropped the knife, which I grabbed in the other hand, blade first, then flipped it into my now bleeding palm. Behind me, I heard the others start, but they didn't rush me. After all, I already had their leader pushed up against the railing, with his own knife held against his jugular. Blunt side first, which he couldn't see, but the effect was the same, abject fear. I twisted a little to keep an eye on his mates, but they were frozen in place, one with his arms aloft as if surrendering to law enforcement. Didn't he do nothing to him?" the Asian boy stammered. Glaswegian then, and scarcely out of his teens. "Now listen," I said to my prisoner, pushing him further forward so he was on tiptoes, my knee against his back. "Either this blade goes in the water, or your blood, or you. Which is it to be?" I yanked his arm a little higher to emphasize the point, feeling a tightening of the tension of his painfully twisted shoulder. "Ow! The blade! Chuck it in! I don't want it!" I did as he suggested, giving his arm one final crunch upwards, so that he'd not be able to use it for a while. Scrawny moaned, staggering away, muttering, "Fucking psycho! We were only messing." Sure you were, I thought. And I was bluffing. I'd have taken another beating not to add his death to my list of personal atrocities. Everything felt weirdly hazy and removed, but I noticed a small crowd had formed, and some of them were filming on phones as the youth shouldered through them and slouched away along the harbour wall. There would be no escaping consequences for this one, but hopefully I had enough witnesses to identify the true aggressor. Then something unexpected. A slow, single hand clap became a rising tide of applause. I didn't want that, and it made me feel sick. I turned away and then really was sick, my stomach contents voiding onto the murky sand below. Did I have any beer left to wash away the taste? No. Obviously I dropped my pint when I'd reacted. The plastic cup now floated in a small puddle of its own making. I gazed towards the bronze mermaid, oblivious in all her seashell finery. She kept her own counsel, unimpressed by the conflicting desires, hopes and aspirations of land dwellers. Soon the crowding of tweeting and Instagramming Margaters dissolved in search of other diversions, and I slouched off to bank that day's takings, yawning into the beginnings of yet another spectacular Kent coast sunset. And there you have it. A little bit more violent than many of my pieces. Yeah, it's sort of I'm rapidly sort of collecting a kind of series of Margate stories. I wonder if I'll try and publish a book of them at some point. That could be fun. Anyway, if you like this, why don't you do one of the following? Share it, hit like, subscribe to the channel if you're not a subscriber, or even leave a comment. It'd be really nice to hear from somebody out there. And I will be back again, no doubt, with another story, or maybe a little discursive piece about being a writer. I'll have to think about that. I have some things to say about copywriting. Anyway, bye Elena in Exile. I'll see you again very soon. Thanks.